right, good morning, everyone. How are y'all doing? Ready for a long weekend? Well, hopefully you get a long weekend. Did everyone else's professors cancel class on Monday? Well, hopefully they did. I've seen a couple heads nod no, so well, sorry to hear that. But no class on here on Monday, so show up if you want, but you'll be probably sitting alone in here. It's up to you. I wouldn't recommend it. I posted a new file in Canvas earlier this morning, so that's what we're going to be in today. It's called MS Excel -if logic and date functions. So if you'll go ahead and pull that up, and then while you're pulling that up, anything that I need to review. So what I did was I took the work from last class that we did together, and I just left it in here so you can look over it. And then also if there's anything I can review, let me know. I do want to make note, I hope you like your seat today because you're basically stuck with it, unfortunately. So like I said last class, I'm going to have everyone put where they're sitting on a seating chart. I hate to have to do this, but just trying to learn names is very difficult with masks on. So I hope you understand. Basically, I've got the podium listed right here in the front, and then I've got the back listed, so in the back. So let's make sure that you kind of fill out the correct seat. I'm going to start it over here. So you'll just put your seat right here. Does that make sense? So right there where my thumb is. Gotcha. So anything I need to review, anything at all, any questions about what we covered last class or anything I can assist with? Okay, I do want to make note, if you do ever have any questions, feel free to ask me while we're going along. If I need to slow down a little bit, if I need to go a little faster. Most of the time I've never been told to go faster, so don't hesitate to let me know. If you're not understanding something, also don't hesitate to ask your neighbor in a whisper, of course, but don't hesitate at all to do either of those things. I want you all to understand Excel at a pretty good level, so that way you can apply it not only to your future classes as a student, but more importantly to your career, because Excel's been around since the 80s. It's not going anywhere. It's certainly a tool that you'll be using, very likely in whatever job you take. And trying to teach you stuff in here that can save you a lot of time and work. So on that note, feel free to ask me questions before and after class. My office hours are held in the new Information Systems Lab just down the hallway, 050 from 10 a.m. until noon, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Feel free to stop by there. Just whatever. I want to make sure that everyone understands. I'm happy to address any questions if you're not getting something. Does that make sense? Okay. So with that out of the way, since there's no questions, we're going to jump in and talk about some conditional logic now. So you'll see I added a few different functions on here. I added Sumifs. I added Countifs, average ifs. So I added those. And if we scroll down this, I also added date, year, month, day. Those are all functions we're going to need to know. Let's see. Less than, greater than, not equal to. That's the ones with the two carets facing each other. And keep scrolling. So we've got less than, equal to, greater than, equal to. So those are the new functions I added. I added these. I don't think these are posted in Canvas, so just make sure you type those out at the bottom of the list. But that's what we're covering today. So a lot of new functions. We can do a lot of exciting things with these. So let's go ahead and start with the if, because the if is really where this all kind of comes together. So an if statement is simply a conditional statement where we start off with some condition, and then we say what happens if it's met and what happens if it's not met. So like the other functions, how do we start them off? So we start off with equals, and then, of course, we type in the function name, if, open parentheses, so condition. Okay, comma, to separate out the different parts of the function. Value of true. And lastly, another comma, value of false. And this is going to be a similar format to most of the conditional logic we'll be using today. So we have a condition. What's going to happen if it's true? What happens if it's false? Everyone clear on that so far? Okay, so let's see an example of it. So I'm just going to start it off with equals if and open parentheses. Someone throw me a number. 12. If 12, let's just say greater than, someone throw me another number. Any number at all. 10. So first of all, from a mathematical standpoint, is 12 greater than 10? It is. So what we're going to see when we finish this if statement is whatever we put for value of truth. Someone throw me a word. And I'm going to put the word inside of quotations because it's a word. Any word at all. Red. Okay. Someone throw me another word. Any word at all within reason, I should say. We don't want to have any problems, but within reason, throw me a word. Blue. Okay. So because we know that 12 is in fact greater than 10, which one of these do we expect to see? Do we expect to see it apply the true, which is going to be the first one? Do we expect to see it apply the false, which is the second one? True. So it should say red if all is correct. So let's see. It does. Now let's say that I were to switch this around a little bit. Instead of doing this 12 greater than 10, let's say I do less than 10. Okay? So now it says blue because 12 is not less than 10. That's a false statement. Everyone okay on that? Okay. So Sumif is a very interesting function as well. And what it does is it adds things together that meet the condition. So I can give it a big list of values, and whatever meets the condition will be added. So, for example, let's go over to this data right here. You can see I have sample data 1, all these different things. Let's say I want to use the mode. So I want to say if this number right here is 7, then I want to add whatever the corresponding value to the right of it is. Does that make sense? And with this one, it's not like VLOOKUP. I could use something to the left of it. I could. So we'll specify both of those. Okay, so it's just going to be equals Sumif. And for the range, this is going to be the range that we're looking for our condition in. So the first thing we're looking for is where the condition is. Because we said we want to use the 7 inside of this column, we're just going to put F comma F, or F colon F, or I'm just going to be lazy and just click the F column. So now we're going to have the criteria be just literally 7. So I'm just literally going to put 7 there. Does everyone get that? Because I'm saying if this value is 7, and what I'm actually going to add is the values to the right of it. So I just, for the sum range, I'm just going to click in that G column. So I want to add 2, 3, and 3. Now from a mathematical standpoint, what is 2 plus 3 plus 3? 8. So what should the answer be for this? Should give us 8, and it does. Now that's a very good thing. Okay, let's go ahead and do Countif. Okay, so for Countif, it's a very similar format to Sumif, where basically we tell it where the condition is we're looking for, what the condition is, and then it's going to count how many instances of that there are. So instead of just using count, this is going to basically do it in one single instance, where otherwise we'd have to use some sort of a nested if, where we'd do count and then have a separate if statement. So this is an easier way to do things if we're trying to count something that meets a certain condition. So we can do count if, let's see. Let's do the months, and let's see how many are greater than 7. Okay, so do you think this will work? Why or why not? Well, let's just see if it works. Okay, so you'll see it didn't work. Now the reason is because the count if, you have to put the condition, if it's a numeric calculation like that, we're using greater than, you have to put that inside of quotes. So I'm not positive on why that is, but because it's using non-numeric values, it does make me put quotes around the condition. And that's going to be true for most of these function ifs. Does that make sense? So make sure you put it inside of quotes. So we have our range that we're looking for, and we're saying if it's greater than 7. Okay, and of course that's 5 because we have 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's 5. So just make sure you put those conditions inside of quotation marks. It's a little bit confusing, but once you understand it, shouldn't face any issues. Okay. Now let's lastly do average if. Okay, so just like the others, we're going to start off by typing in the function name. And first we're going to say what the range is that we're looking for. So let's do the G column this time. Let's select the G column. And in this case, we're going to set the criteria. We've got a couple options. What do you guys think? Do you guys want to do criteria 1? Or do you guys want to do, let's say, less than 3? Which one sounds more fun? Less than 3? Okay, we can certainly do that. Less than 3. And lastly, we're actually going to add the corresponding values. Now let's make it interesting and do the E column, just to show you that we can. Okay, so it's going to give us the average. So basically what it did was it took these values, and actually, because we did less than 3, it took from here to here, and it averaged it. Does that make sense? Because that's the condition we applied, was if this column is less than 3, so it's going to be these, it's going to average these values. Okay, that's pretty powerful so far. We're going to see some examples where we could use this and apply it in just a little bit. Okay, let's move on a little bit. Now we're going to do Countifs. And Countifs is where it gets a little bit more confusing. So, used to be inside of Excel, there was a function called IFS, ifs. And they removed it, but luckily they left Countifs, average ifs, and Sumifs. So, as the name would imply, it's more than one if condition. So instead of just having a single condition, we're now going to have multiple conditions. And the cool thing is, these conditions don't have to use the same range that we're looking at. So for example, one of my conditions could be that the month is no greater than 6. That's one condition I could apply. I could also apply that the G column is less than 2. So those are conditions I could apply. And that's very powerful, as we'll see here as we move on. But let's just go ahead and do a quick example of this. So I'm going to do Countifs. Now, you will notice that the criteria range is the first thing we're going to put in. So for the criteria range, we're going to start off by saying months. So we're just going to select the E column, do the criteria. Someone throw me any criteria at all. What's an interesting criteria we could use? Okay, so just equal to 12. We could certainly do that. So in this case, let's just do greater than 11. Just keep things nice and easy. And of course, we always want to make sure that we put that inside of quotation marks. And now we also want to count something else. Now, what's the problem with doing this right now? So there's going to be one instance so far. But anything over here, we're going to have to select a different condition. So if we were to select the second range, would you all rather use F or G? F, okay. So now, give me another condition. So it can be 1 through 8. So you said equal to 7? Okay. So let's just do greater than 6. And now, for the equal to 7, we're just going to go over to F. And let's just do less than 8. Okay? So now this should count up this 1 down here, as well as the others that meet the condition. Oh, that's right, I do. It's easy to forget that. And honestly, it's not the most intuitive thing ever. So, of course, that gives us 3. So, basically, looking for 2 things there, and it's going to add up everything that meets those conditions. Does that make sense? So it's a useful thing, and we'll see that some more as we go on. Now, Sumifs is going to be, Sumifs and average ifs are going to have basically the same syntax. They're going to be a little bit more complicated than Countifs, and they're actually going to change the order. So the condition is not going to be first anymore like it was on the if statements. Does that make sense? So we'll see that. So Sumifs. Now the first thing we're going to do is tell it what range we're going to be adding. So in this case, let's just keep it nice and simple and use the F range. So we're going to add up the F range. And now we put in the criteria range. So I'm just going to use the month criteria. And now for the criteria of the month, let's just do less than 4. Okay. And let's also use the month criteria again. And let's do greater than 7. Okay. So basically what we're doing is we're first setting where we're going to be adding. And then we're setting what criteria do we want to apply to add it or not. So if it's a month that is less than 4, so 3, 2, 1, it's going to add. If it's greater than 7, so 7, 7, 7, 8, it's going to add. Does that make sense? Okay. So basically, it has to have all the conditions true, though, for that to happen. So in this case, none of those conditions, they basically cancel each other out. So that's what we're having happen there. Let's talk a little bit about year, month, and day. So if you type in equals year and you had a date in there, so maybe like, I don't know, 12/31/21. You could basically parse out those different parts of it. So you'd parse out the year, parse out the month, parse out the day. So let's just see a quick example of that here. 12/31/2021. Okay, and as you can see, that formatted it as a date. So right here, it's formatted as a date. Okay, so if I go equals year of this number, it's going to give me the year. And in fact, let's be lazy. Let's make this an absolute reference. Why am I going to make this an absolute reference? Why do you think? So what does an absolute reference do for us? So what an absolute reference is going to do is allow us to copy this down without copying the, basically changing the cell that we're applying it to. So it's always going to apply it to cell C27 because we made it an absolute reference, as you can see there. $sign before the row in the column. So now let's go ahead and see that. And you guys remember how to copy down. Just go to this little blue square, not blue, green square right here. You can just click and drag to. And now we put year, so it's still going to be using the year function. We just change this to month, and we just change this to day. That's basically all we have to do there. So we can parse out parts of a date. Does that make sense? So, you guys ready to see this applied to some stuff? I think it'll make a lot more sense once we see it applied to some real data. Everyone good on that? So, yeah, so the year, basically, you just type in equals year and then select the date. So in this case, I added in this C27. I just put a random date there. You can put whatever date you wanted. It's really up to you. And then I made it at an absolute reference. So that way when I copy it down, I don't have to change which cell it applies to. Otherwise, if I didn't make this an absolute reference, this the month right here would have gotten the cell C28, and the day would have gotten the cell C29. So yeah, you can use the $sign before the row and the column if you want to have both the row and the column stay the same. You can just hit F4 on your keyboard, and it'll go ahead and change it between the two. So like you can change it to be just the row stays the same, just the column stays the same, or now it's a completely relative reference. So lots of different options there. Yeah. So you just change it to month for the second one, and you just change it to day for the third. Now, we could be a little bit lazier than that, actually, if we wanted to just be able to straight up copy this entire thing, and that's a great question. So instead of doing equals year and manually typing year, because we have year right here in cell A27, we could just type in A27, and now we want to make sure that we put and to concatenate it, and now that is going to concatenate for text. So let's see here. Well, we'll come back to that. So basically right now what it's doing is it's applying that as text instead of using it as a function name. There's a way to do it where we would just basically get the function name from it, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. But we'll see some examples that use stuff similar to that in a little bit here. Any other questions? All right. So first, we have the Amazon worksheet. Everyone see that down here? AMZN. So basically, this is Amazon's stock return data. And we can see we have lots of different columns here. And basically, there's a couple things we want to do inside of this worksheet. First one I want to do is make it larger so everyone can kind of see it a little bit better. And like I said, a lot of different things we have. So we have quarter end. This is going to be a date. So this is the date that the quarter ended. Different number of shares. So that's going to be probably common shares outstanding. You got taken finance yet? So there's several different types of shares. There's preferred stock, which generally speaking we're not going to have the data for, at least not in this format. It's probably going to be common shares outstanding, so what you go out and buy as a normal person. And when I say normal person, I mean an investor who does not have connections to the company, basically. So a little bit more complicated than that, but that's just a simplification of it. We have a lot of different other things on here. Intangible assets, that's an important thing. Revenue is very important. Earnings is very important. Earnings per share, that's going to be extremely important. Lots of great information on here about Amazon. So, first thing I want to do is come over here, and we can see we need to get the year, the month, and the date. So, how are we going to get the year of each of these cells? How could we get that? If I want to get the year that this row, which is like a record inside of a database, I want to know which year that was. What function am I going to use to pull that year out? So it's going to be equals year, and as we said on the first, we have the year at the very beginning, so A2. Now, let me ask you guys a question. Should A2 be an absolute or a relative reference if we're going to copy the formula down? So it should be relative, but it may be a good idea to keep the A as an absolute reference. So we're going to just keep the column absolute, but have the row be relative. So how can we do that? Let's put a $sign before the A, and that's going to make sure that as we copy this across, it's not going to change from looking at the A column. But as we copy it down, it will change looking at the row because you can see the number, which is the row, does not have an absolute reference assigned to it. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so let's go ahead and see what this looks like. So we've got the year, and of course it should be 2018. And as we can see, it is. But we want to get the month and the day. So we're just going to go ahead and grab this and copy it across. So now we're still looking at the A column in the second row because we haven't gone down yet. So because we set the column to be an absolute reference, it's not going to look at the B column or the C column as it would otherwise. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's go ahead and change this to month because we want month. And lastly, let's change this to day. Okay. So now we have the year, the month, and the day all pulled out. Now we can just copy it down. So we're just going to click and drag all the way to the end of the file. And this is basically how we get that information separated out. So once you kind of understand how these functions work, I don't think they're the most difficult thing ever. In fact, some of this other stuff we'll be doing, it's going to be a lot more exciting. So everyone to this point. Anyone not to this point yet? Yeah. What do you mean? So basically, let me show that again. So you get to this point where you have the 3, the year, the month, and the day highlighted, right? Okay. Then you just come to here, and if we wanted to be lazy, we could just delete this column. And then from here, all we have to do is double click, and it's going to go ahead and automatically do it to the end of the data. But because we don't have that column there, because we do have an extra column there, what we do instead is we just go ahead and grab this, click it, hold it, and then just go all the way down. So you just kind of scroll with your mouse, and that copies it down to the end of the page. Does that make sense? So because there's an extra column here, what it's doing when you double click is it's seeing where the end of the data to the left of it is. Because there's no data to the left of it, this is null, meaning it's empty, it's not going to allow you to double click and move it down. Does that make sense? Okay. So I've got a couple questions here. We want to see the average of December revenues. Now, if we wanted to be fancy, we could actually add in a new sort of column here. And we're going to do that, actually. Let's go ahead and add in a new column. Just insert. So you click on this column, the AS column, or I guess it's AR until you insert. You just click the insert button. That's going to add in a new column. Okay, does everyone see that? Okay. And then once we've done that, we're just going to put in quarter. If I could spell, I would put in quarter. So quarter. Okay. And you guys know what a quarter is, right? So in the context of business, quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. Okay. So it's just 1/4, basically. 25% of a year, 3 months. And what we're going to do is we're going to set some logic up to look and see which one of these months, and we're going to assign a quarter to it. So let's go ahead and do this. Now, we haven't talked about this yet, but this is where we're going to start applying nested if statements. So if we were able to use multiple conditions inside of a single if, we would just use IFS. However, that function's been removed from Excel. So we're going to have to do this a little bit differently. The way this is going to work is we're going to have an if statement. We're going to put our first condition in there. We're going to put if it's true, we're going to put whatever the value is. Then we're going to put a comma. And the false, we're going to put another if statement. And we're going to keep going and keep going and keep going until we get all 4 quarters in there. Does that make sense? It'll make more sense once we start it. So let's go ahead and start with if. We want to see if this value is equal to, and let me see. I want to make sure I'm telling you the right way to do equals to in Excel. I think it's the 2 facing each other. Okay, so it's just an equal sign. Gotcha. Just wanted to make sure I didn't do anything wrong. So if this equals 3. Okay, now if it's the 3rd month, what quarter is that going to be? It's going to be the 1st quarter. So we're just going to put a 1 here. Okay, now, like I said, this is the first part. So we've got the first condition. What's going to happen if it's true? If it's not true, we're going to want to go into the second if statement. So we're going to do another if statement. Once we hit a comma, it's going to give us a value of false. We're going to put another if statement. And now we're going to look at the same value and say, is it equal to 6? Okay, if it is equal to 6, what are we going to want to do? So if it's a second quarter because it's 6 months, we're just going to put a 2 there. Now we do yet another if statement. So we do another if for the value of false. Open it up. Look and see, is this equal to 9? Okay, if it is, what are we going to put here for the value of true? 3, exactly right. And then lastly, we're going to do value if false again. If this right here equals 12, then it's going to be 4. And else, we're going to put problem. Okay, now's the fun part. We close out all these parentheses. And whenever you're doing this, it's important that you look very closely because it'll sort of have whichever one you're closing a little bit more bold than the others. So probably be easy to see on your screen, but basically, as I close out this first one, you'll see it gets a little bit bold for a second. Second one gets a little bold, third, and fourth. And that's all the parentheses we need to close out. So again, what we're doing is we're going back to our good friend the if statement. We're doing if condition if value of true, and then we're doing another if statement for the value of false. Okay, so on. If. Okay. Does that make sense to everyone? That's what we're doing. So just want to make sure that you match the number of parentheses. 3 parentheses on the left, 3 on the right. It's called a nested if statement. Okay. And so whenever I copy this down, you can see, thank you. Did everyone sign this? All right, like I say, just make sure you remember where you sit. If not, I got the signature, not a huge deal. But now it applied the quarter to all these, and because they're all either the 3rd, 6th, 9th, or 12th month, it went ahead and applied them all. So it's kind of a cool thing we can do. All right, now let's start doing some more fun stuff. So we've kind of converted some dates, done some other things. Question? Yeah, sure. I can't really zoom, but what I can do is I can copy it and put it in a Word document and zoom in on that. How about that? All right, question? So I think that the reason is because we're starting off with a cell definition, and if we did put parentheses, it would literally look for AS2 as like looking at the text AS2 instead of the cell as AS2. Does that make sense? So that's basically what we're doing there. It is a little confusing, I'll admit, but just once we've done it some, it'll kind of come more naturally. So, like I said, the first thing we do is we make an if statement, put in the condition, and then put the value of true. The second, if it's false, we're just going to do another if statement. So that's what we're doing there. And again, we just keep doing that until we're done with if statements. So I'll leave that up for a minute. Any other questions? It's the same way you did with all the others when you copied them down, just that basically that green rectangle in the bottom right corner, just double click it. Or you can just click it and drag. Either way is fine. All right. You got another question? So yeah, because the way the data is organized, it gives us the date of the quarter end. So we know that if a quarter ends in 3, we're going to assume it's quarter 1. If a quarter ends in 6, which is going to be the 6th month, which is June, it's going to be quarter 2. Does that make sense? That's what we're doing there. All right, anyone need a little bit more time with this, or are we good? Okay. So that's how we would apply the quarters. Now let's go ahead and do some fun stuff. Average number of December revenues. So we're just going to basically do average if. Now we're going to look for the range. Then we're going to get the criteria, and then the average range. So the range is going to be where we have the month, and that's where we're looking for the condition. Now the criteria, because we know it's going to be December, we're just going to put in 12. And then lastly, the average range is going to be what we actually want to average. So we don't want to average 12. What's the average of 12? Do we need an Excel formula to tell us the average of 12 is 12? We don't. So we're actually going to average for the average range. we're going to go ahead and get the revenues. So somewhere along here we have revenues. The in column right here. So just grab that in column, and now we have the average December revenues. If I want to format this a little bit nicer, I certainly can. So use accounting, and that looks a little bit better. We can see that is, what, $14 billion for the average December revenues. And we can do that for any month we want. We could certainly, if we have the data, instead of using the 12th month, we could use the 3rd month. Just change it around a little bit. Okay, is that clear to everyone? Any questions? All right. Next, let's see number of negative earnings per share. So if we just use average if to tell the average of December revenues, what do you think we're going to use to determine the number of negative earnings per share? What function? What do you think? So it's going to be the count, but we want to have a condition applied to it where we're only going to count them if they're negative. So we're going to do count if, and then we're going to first get the range. So that's going to be the earnings per share, which we're just going to use earnings per share basic. And now we're going to apply the condition. As I said, we're going to put this inside of quotes. So what are we looking for? Negative? Is that right? Okay. So we're just going to do less than 0, end quote, and hit enter. And that gives us 28. Now, if we want to make sure this works, we can just change the condition to be positive, see how many are greater than 0, and that's 56. So everyone understands what earnings are, right? So we've got EBIT, EBITDA, all those, net income. Yeah, basically that's what we're doing here. So let's make sure we have this condition to less than 0. And then lastly, we want to look for the number of PE ratios greater than 20. Now, if we think back to finance class, what is a PE ratio? So PE ratio is price to earnings. So we're seeing, how much is a stock valued relative to its earnings or income. And when we think about that, if something is greater than 20, we tend to think of that as being overvalued. Okay? So, there's a lot of math and stuff behind it, but for the most part, just kind of understand that a PE greater than 20 typically tends to be overvalued. Less than 20 typically tends to be undervalued. Not 100% of the time. Obviously, there's exceptions. But if we think back to earlier in history, what happened right around 2000 in the economy? 2000, 2001, a lot of stuff happened. We had Enron scandal. We had WorldCom a little bit after that. We had the whole dot-com bust. So many different websites were drastically overvalued. They had PE ratios in the thousands. Okay. They were earning a tiny amount of money, yet they were having very high valuations by investors. And that's a problem. Not going to go into why too much, but just understand that if something's overvalued, could indicate the presence of a bubble. And a bubble's no good. We're talking about it in this context. So let's just go ahead and take a quick look and see number of PE ratios greater than 20. Okay. So we first find the count if, and we're looking for the PE ratios. Where's that at? AG, thank you. AG. And we're going to do the condition greater than 20. Okay, and that gives us 51. Okay, let's see how many are less than 20. 0. What does that suggest? Suggests that Amazon has always been overvalued. Now, there are some that aren't present, if I remember correctly, from this data set, but that's basically what we're talking about there. Any questions so far? Yeah. So great question. What I did was I clicked in the cell right here. Just click in this cell, and I changed it from the type it was, I think, general or number. Just change that to accounting, or you could do currency as well. Yeah, the $ sign will do something similar there, but I usually like to make sure I have the complete control personally, but you've got options. Any other questions before we move on? Sure, so that's just using Countif, and then we're just grabbing the Q column, so Q colon Q for the beginning Q into Q, and then just make sure we use our good for in the quotes for this condition, and it's going to be, in this case, because we're looking for negative EPS, it's going to be less than 0 for the condition. Any other questions? Yeah. So it just makes it easier to read. Oh, are you talking about if I'm doing an absolute reference or right here in this cell? So an absolute reference, like we have a reference, let's say we had C23. If we copy this down, it's going to go C24, C25, C26. If we copy this across, it's going to go D24, or D23, I mean. E23, F23. But if we set a $sign in front of it, whenever we copy it down, it's going to copy down exactly. Now, right now, if we set a $sign in front of the C, which is of course going to give us the column, it's going to hold the column constant. So if we leave it like this, where the row does not have a $sign in front of it, the row is still relative, but the column is going to be absolute. So instead of being C, D, E, it's going to be C, 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 and C. Okay? Now, if we were to change this and we were to put just the $sign in front of the row, instead of being 23, 24, 25, 26 when we copy down, it's all going to be 23. And if I were smart, I wouldn't ever erase the 2's, but no one ever accused me of being smart. So that's what we're doing. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? All right, I am always happy to answer any questions, but let's go ahead and do something even more exciting. Do you guys like housing prices? Well, maybe you don't, but hopefully you at least understand them to some degree. So what we're going to do is a couple different things here. We've got a couple of things we're going to calculate here, as you can see, and we're going to do this nice and easy. I don't like to do things complicated. I like to do things easy. So the first thing we're going to do, get the most common year of house. So what does that sound like? Most common year. Does that sound like a mode? And let's make this a little bit larger. So equals mode of the year. So the year is going to be column U. And that's all we have to do for that first one right there. So most common year house built in this data set is 2005. Does that mean that there are more houses built in 2005 than any other year? No, because this is sample data, not population data. If this were population data, it would. We could probably easily get population data if we were to aggregate all property tax records across the entire country. That's a big undertaking. Median sale price. How are we going to calculate the median sale price? Equals median, and then we're just going to select the sales price column. Where's sales price? I was about to say I wasn't smart enough to get sales price, but I was. It's a CD column. Okay, that gives us the median sales price. Everyone with me so far? Okay, now this is where it gets a little bit more fun. We want to get the average 50 square foot, 60 square foot, 70 square foot. So basically, we've got a range. Everyone know what the 50s are? It's 1950 to 1959. Okay, that is the 50s. Okay, so we want to get the square footage of these years. Now, how can we do that? Can we just use average if? We can't, because we have multiple conditions. We want to not only be, in this case, we're going to use greater than 1949, but it also needs to be less than, wait a second, I did the greater than wrong. So it's going to be not only greater than 1949. It's also going to be less than 1960. Does everyone understand why? Because it's got to be within this range. So we could do less than equal to 1950. It's just more work, so why not keep it simple, I say. So let's go ahead and do that. Average ifs. And the first thing we're going to do is the average range. So in this case, we're looking for the average square feet. So we're going to go over the square foot column. Where's that at? AV. And now we apply the first condition, which is going to be based on the year built. So the U column. And we want to apply the criteria, as we just said, of greater than 1949. So just do greater than 1949. And we want to do the same thing for less than 1960. So just add a new sort of criteria range there. It's going to be the same exact range because we're just looking at the year built again. And we're going to do less than 1960. Okay, close that off. So everyone okay with that? So now we've got a lot of things to calculate here. Okay, we need to copy them down. What's the best way to do that, you think? I've got 4 columns here. That should give you a little bit of a hint. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off by the first year and the last year that we're going to have. So we're going to use 1949 and 1960. 1949, 1960, because these are both years that are going to be the condition we're going to base it on. And we want to copy these down. Now, if we just copy them like this, what's going to happen? Is that going to give us a 10-year increment? No, it's going to give us the exact same values. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to set this next column below it to be equals the previous column. So we just click on the previous cell. We could enter the cell manually. Plus 10. Why plus 10? Someone tell me why I'm adding 10 to that. So why am I doing this? So the reason is because we need to make sure that we have these columns where we have the years we're going to apply. Now, what's one of the problems with doing it this way? Okay, just based off of this, if we take this cell and we just stick it right here, let's just show why that's a problem. Okay, so if we're trying to calculate the 1950 square feet, you can tell that as soon as we start to apply the quotes, we're not going to be able to stick a cell in here because if we do, let's say we put in CE3, it's inside of quotes. So it's going to completely mess up. CE3, and you can tell it gives us divide by 0. So instead we want to get the whole thing in there. So we have 1949, and we need to make sure that it is greater than 1949. So to do that, all we're going to do, put an equals. We're going to do a quotation because what we're going to do is we're going to put that text in there. For it literally says greater than 1949. And we'll be able to copy this across where we don't have to manually type anything. Is that clear to everyone? So we're going to start off with less than, I think, or greater than. And then we're going to close off the quote. We're going to use the and symbol. And symbol is going to allow us to concatenate that text. Concatenate just means add together. So if I have 2 phrases, let's say I have cat and dog. Right now, they're separate phrases. We're going to assume they're in separate cells. If I do equals that cell and that cell, I'm just going to put cat and dog. And then it's going to give us cat dog. Does that make sense to everyone? That's what we're doing. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. I'm going to set it equal to that cell right there. And as predicted, that's exactly what it's going to give us. We're going to copy this across first. Before we copy it down, make sure we change this to be less than instead of greater than. And now we can just grab this and copy it down. Okay. And now, instead of having it manually typed in, we can just put in the cell name, and that'll go ahead and apply that condition if we did this right. Okay, gives us the exact same value. That's pretty cool, isn't it? I think it's pretty cool. I might be a little bit biased. So we're just going to copy that down. And that gives us the average square footage by each decade built. So if we wanted to manually look at the maximum value, what is it going to be? It's going to be the 90s. So the 90s like their square footage, I guess. But if we wanted to look at this and say which one of these is going to be the max, we could also use the max function. So two different ways to easily tell. All right. We're going to do the same thing, but for sale price. So we're still looking at the average price. We're just looking at the sale price now. It's probably a good idea to just copy this right here. And basically all we're doing is we're just changing the average if. Instead of looking at averaging the range of the square footage, we're going to instead look at the sale price. So all we're doing is we're changing this right here to be CD, colon CD, because we're changing it from square footage, which was AV, the AV column, to the sale price column. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll just copy this whole equation because it doesn't really change beyond that. So paste this guy in, and like I said, just change the average range. So it's going to be, instead of looking at that, we're going to look at the sale price. So we're going to see which decade has the most valuable homes. Whoops, that's more than I wanted to copy. All right. So as we can tell, based off this, and it's not really surprising, the 10s have the highest sale price. But what's one of the problems with this? We know that the 90s have bigger homes. So we might want to look at the average price per square foot by the decade. Does that make sense? So two ways we could do this. Since we already have both the square footage and the sale price calculated, this is by the sale price by the square footage. That's going to give us the average price per square foot for that decade. Or we could manually type in both of these equations and divide them by each other. But since we've already done it, we don't have to do it that way. So I'm just going to take the average sale price divided by the average square footage, hit enter, and that gives us $108 per square foot for the average square footage price for a 50s home. So unsurprisingly, a newer home is going to be more expensive per square foot than an older home. That's not too surprising. This is a large enough data set. We could probably draw that conclusion, but anyway. So is everyone clear on that? I can, but I think we ran over time by 2 minutes already. So sorry about that, guys. I did not mean to go over. It ends at 9:55, right? Well, I do apologize. I'm going to keep talking, but like I say, we are over time, so feel free to leave if you need to. I don't mean to hold anyone over time. Just got a little carried away. What would you like me to go over again? Okay. And I will be posting this at the end of the day. So, like I said, I do apologize for going over by a couple minutes. That's my bad. Have a great long weekend, everyone. See you Wednesday. I'll hang out for a few minutes if you have any questions. And if not, I'll head to office hour in a little bit. Have a good one.